Lawyer, litigation attorney. If I was a minute late, I risked losing that case. So I'm trying to be equally as much of a stickler with the time as you can see my fellow legislators, not so much. In any event, so welcome to everyone. It's such a thrill to see people in person, and I'm so grateful for all of you attending, taking time out of your busy schedule for such an important topic. And most of us have spoken before, but the point was to really get all the talent in one room. Especially during COVID, you start to feel like you're operating in a silo. So we're hoping to take this time and really move things together a little bit. So in the room, I'm sure you all know, we've got local officials from Plymouth, Pembroke, Kingston, public housing, shelters, business, planning, and councils on aging. You're all familiar with the problem. Housing is too expensive. Over 1,000 evictions for non-payment of rent have been filed in Plymouth County since January 2020. And over 80% of extremely low-income renters and 50% of households just under or at area median income are burdened by housing costs. It's constricting our workforce, forcing families into chronic instability, leaving seniors without options, and limiting our workforce. Workers are moving out of the area because they can't find housing. The problem isn't town by town, and neither is the solution. So I've been advocating for statewide solutions with a push for greater funding for RAFT funding for renters, small landlords, and homeowners, number one. 2, investment in landlord-tenant mediation and legal representation. And 3, grant funding to employers for housing cost supports to essential workers. A co-sponsored legislation to expand housing opportunities for low-income constituents, veterans, and first responders, to create climate-resilient housing, and to reduce barriers for renters. Each of you is an expert in housing. You have different areas of expertise and understand the impacts of different policies. You all know what your communities need, and you know what you need to get us there. You are all in the best position to answer what solutions are most needed at the state level and what collaborations are needed to innovate solutions to long-term problems. There's not enough time today to discuss every aspect of housing, but I look forward to the ongoing conversation. Next, we'll hear from my great colleagues, Rep. Lenatra Muratori, Then we'll hear from Secretary Keneally of the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development to discuss existing housing initiatives. Finally, and most importantly, I'll be asking you about the scope of the problem and where we go from here. A few logistics before I pass it off. Please be sure to sign in and tell us what future conversation topics you'd like to see. For those on Zoom, please type it into the chat box. And one last thing before I pass to Rep. Lenatra. I think most of you know, I grew up, my dad was in a wheelchair pretty much my whole life. Accessibility is, I'm keenly aware, let's just say, of the obstacles of trying to get to places you need to be. Same thing with a baby carriage, many of us are familiar with. So I just want to highlight that element because as I was coming in today, it was mentioned a couple of times. And on that, I want to go ahead and invite Rep. Lenatra to the mic. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Senator Moran. I honestly didn't realize I was speaking and I had dental work done this morning, so this whole side of my face is numb, including my nose. So if it looks funny, that's why.
I can't understand you.
But welcome, everyone. Welcome. So glad to see everyone here today. Most of you know that not only am I your state representative, not all your state representatives, but I'm a state representative, but I'm also a real estate broker. So I see the housing shortage firsthand. I see our first-time buyers really struggling to purchase a home. They have 6 and 7 offers on homes and they don't get them. And I see how discouraged they are. I have a 27-year-old son that I've shown many homes to who is extremely discouraged. I also do a lot of the senior centers. I see Gretchen here, Michelle. And they reach out to me. You know, they're in these big, huge homes that they can't afford or they can't keep up. And where are they going to go? There's not many places for them to go. Our affordable housing is scarce at best. And even our communities that we have one in Kingston, Town and Country, it's so hard to get in there. When one person leaves, there's 10 others that want to come in. So I'm looking forward to hearing what everybody has to say, and I'm going to go rest the right side of my face now. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, and I will introduce my colleague, the one and only Matt Montgomery.
See, my face is fine. Good to see everyone. Thank you, Senator Moran, for putting this on and inviting us here for this. A very important subject that I've been talking about for a number of years, even when on the board of selectmen. And it's good to see, Russ Shirley here from the Housing Authority and other folks that are really here. It's more than, and I have a daughter too, who just bought a house finally. An older daughter just bought a house last year, but they overpaid for it, $40,000, $50,000 over. It was difficult to get a house for them. Like I said, it's not affordable. But more importantly, I think it's people, the seniors, trying to get some affordable senior housing, some workforce housing, and that's something we really need to talk about. Help with the homeless folks as well, and get some real housing involved. Now, I'm happy that the governor signed the housing bill that we passed in the House and the Senate January 14th. So, there's some good teeth in that. There's some good zoning change law, I think, in that as well. That will help along the way, but we also need more funding. And I do think that with, with the ARPA funding that's out there, and both Kathy and I on the House Ways and Means together, and our last hearing is going on right now about the ARPA money and what to do with that $5.3 billion. But we believe a lot of it should go to housing as well. So I think the timing is good with the new housing law change and with money out there from the federal government and hopefully the state government as well, that will really make some changes over the next several years in housing. So once again, thank you so much for having us today.
Thank you so much, Matt. I know that Secretary Keneally is up next. What's our time in 5 minutes? Okay. So I want to just throw a few things out, and just to make it really clear that the whole point of us getting together is to share ideas. And I know most of y'all know each other, but it's an opportunity to elevate the conversation with the 3 of us here. So what I probably will have either Addison or Monica just kind of pass the mic around to folks, just so everyone can hear easily. One of the things I was thinking about is particular views, whether it's from the senior side, affordable side, young person side. What are the three greatest challenges in affordable housing?
I think from the disability community, the most important things that we can talk about are the 3 A's. That's affordable, accessible, and available. I work at Independent Associates, and we're the independent living center that covers Plymouth County and parts of Bristol County. And on a daily basis, about 20% of the phone calls that we receive are folks that are looking for access to housing. And so when we look at the built community, not every person with a disability is a person that is looking for a home in subsidized housing. Many folks are looking to be able to move to Massachusetts to work. There's many talented folks with disabilities that are looking to get a job. Yet finding an accessible home when you live in one of the oldest counties in the United States is incredibly hard. So the biggest challenge to that really is looking at, whenever you're looking at building the environment, are we making the environment fully accessible? Can every person participate in what we're doing? That increases access to seniors, persons with disabilities, and any other person that will be coming into the community. But that's the biggest challenge that we see every single day. We feel probably no less than 10 to 20 phone calls per week. Folks calling asking, is there any unit in any town, anywhere, that a person with a mobility device can get into, market rate or not? And that's a big issue.
It's hard, does it make sense to ditch the mic or?
You could do this without the mic. If you do use the mic, if you're on the outer edges of the tables, just walk in a little towards the middle. It'll help with the sound.
Do you want the mic in?
Hi, Mary Bowman from Old Colony Planning Council, and I think the only challenge at this point really is not having housing be a four-letter word. It is so deemed as being the misnomer and the information about what it is and more importantly, what it isn't. And all of that becomes, the acceptance and, in terms of accessibility and all those affordability pieces. My daughter and son-in-law just bought a house in Brockton, 480 in Brockton, a 3-bedroom. They were very lucky where they knew the owners, and so they took it off the open and walked right in, and they have no clue in what kind of a blessing that was, right? So whether it's their sons or daughters, and it shouldn't be that way. That's how you have others who, have no connection. You're walking in and you need to be in their place. So I think the challenge that I would like to just have it be raised is the housing being deemed as something that really is part of the quality of life of the community.
That we're entitled to it. I'm gonna just have Monica jump on the mic. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate this. This is awesome. I am Bill Shenard. I'm the town manager for the town of Pembroke. And one of the biggest challenges that we have in producing new housing stock is infrastructure. We have old, narrow roadways with no sidewalks. We have an older water system that needs updating, and we have no sewers. And many, if you know Pembroke, many sensitive areas for waterways, so doing large sewer treatment plants are difficult and challenging. So infrastructure for new housing is critically important for us. And secondly is the market, which we really can't control. Developers don't want to do affordable housing when they can do $1 million homes. A subdivision of 10 homes at $1 million versus an affordable housing complex. They're in and out of those homes quickly. We're managing affordable housing if it's a rental market or even selling it. It's a different body of work for them.
So there's the expense, there's the fact of making it too difficult. Call me out when I need to switch gears. Bednar?
But I would, and I'm on the school committee. I think one of the possible things in terms of what, in terms of the needs of the community. I think that we live in communities that are just single family home based. And there is more diversity in terms of people that live in those communities and their needs. And so are we addressing the needs of the community? When people speak of the difficulty in finding homes, yes, we do have to acknowledge that when we talk about like homelessness as opposed to elderly housing, as opposed to families. But there are also single persons who can't find homes, and they don't necessarily fit in this homelessness situation. It's just the fact that rent and mortgage far exceeds their wage earnings. And so are we addressing that matter in terms of the variety of housing that we
So we need to look at rentals, we need to look at home ownership, we need to look at walkability. I want to just switch gears for a second and introduce Secretary Keneally. We're very grateful to have his participation, and I'm just going to step aside so we can give the floor. Secretary Keneally, thank you very much.
Well, great. Thank you, Senator. Great to be with you all. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, terrific. I'm here in Revere for an event we're going to kick off shortly, but so pleased we could make this work out, and always happy to talk about this incredibly important topic. Senator, would you like me to go on with some comments on housing? What would be most helpful at this stage?
Some time just for your thoughts, having recently been in the district, which I certainly appreciate, the tour with you, just to throw in a few ideas. We just, you're coming in at a point where we're looking at the cost of housing for young people is out of this world. We're looking at the fact that we don't have enough of a variety of types of housing to fit the needs of our community. So those are a couple of things we just wanted to get your broader perspective on.
Great. Well, I'm happy to do that. And it was great to see you and Rep. Moratori at Pine Hills recently, which is just an amazing development, 3,000 acres of mixed use, open space, master plan development. It's just really quite extraordinary to see that in person. But I would say this, there are few issues I think that are more pressing before us as a state than our housing crisis. And we've been using that term housing crisis for a very long time on our team. And for us, we have an issue with lack of housing production. And so for perspective, from 1960 to 1990 in Massachusetts, we permitted about 900,000 new housing units. And from 1990 till today, a similar 30-year period of time, the number's about half that. And so if you think about what's happened over that ensuing period of time in terms of our population growth, the growth of our economy, and the fact that our housing production has fallen off dramatically, supply and demand being what it is, what do you have? Well, you have rising prices. And so we've had among the fastest growing rents and home values of any state in the country. Rents are up about 75% since the year 2000. That's adds a statewide average. I think for communities closer to Metro Boston, that number is quite a bit higher. Home prices have increased faster than any other state in the country since 1980. And I always have to confess, I've been here in Massachusetts pretty much my entire life. And I always thought we were, for all of our wonderful attributes, I always looked at us as being a somewhat of a high cost state. And I was really surprised to learn that in 1980, our home values were about the national average. We were an average cost state for housing not that long ago. And so it's been quite a challenging period of time now with respect to housing. I will add as well that we have among the largest racial home ownership gaps in the country. And so today in the Commonwealth, 70% of white households own a home and 37% of non-white households own a home. And so obviously in a state where we take the notion of equity very seriously, this is a very extraordinary gap in terms of racial home ownership gap. And so we got a real challenge. And as the senator mentioned, it really hits every segment of our population. It certainly impacts our seniors. Many of whom want to stay in the communities they've lived in for a long time and can't find suitable housing options. It certainly impacts our young families and people looking to build a life here in the Commonwealth. It impacts everybody, and it impacts all regions. So we have to simply do a lot more with respect to housing. As an administration, we tried to attack this problem in a few different respects. About 3 years ago, the governor signed the largest housing bond bill in the state's history, $1.8 billion. We've put that money to work over the last 3 years. We've invested about $1.4 billion to create over 20,000 housing units. So trying to attack this problem through public subsidies, public investments at record levels. I will, of course, mention the housing choice legislation. Very grateful to our partners in the legislature for getting that one over the finish line. As part of the economic development bill the governor signed in January, included something called housing choice, which is arguably the most important zoning reform we've had in about 50 years around here. And it makes it easier to rezone properties at the local level for a whole series of housing, what we call best practices. It lowers that approval threshold from a 2/3 supermajority down to a simple majority. I think that will have the effect of unlocking production of all types of housing everywhere. And so between the zoning reform and substantial public investment, we're I think, making some progress. I will add, of course, that the governor has a proposal before the legislature now to invest about $1 billion, up to $1 billion out of the $5.3 billion the state received with the American Rescue Plan Act. And I think this would be extraordinarily helpful in attacking, again, this housing crisis. The proposal is to spend $500 million on home ownership, again, getting at this idea of the home ownership gaps we have around our state and the opportunities for wealth building that ownership of a home presents, and about $500 million for the production of more affordable rental housing. And if you look at the details in that proposal, it is a combination of, on the home ownership side, support for folks that want to buy their first home. So down payment assistance and similar programs in tandem with substantial investments in producing more such homes. And so we have a program now called Commonwealth Builder, which is about a $60 million a year program, which we'd like to increase. We'd like to add $200 million to that, so take it from 60 to 200 and produce a lot more homes to be owned in an affordable manner. And then on the rental production side, this would be a combination of funding for what we call our rental rounds. We do these once or twice a year, announce new rounds of financing for production of affordable rental housing, but also have a particular focus on senior and veteran housing. And so it would, again, added with the substantial funds we have already, these new funds out of the American Rescue Plan Act would be enormously helpful. I will say on that one, as we designed the proposal for the ARPA funds across all dimensions of what we do, housing, workforce development, downtown development, everything, the whole spirit of the proposal is meant to build on proven successful programs. And so it's to put more capital behind things we know are working already. And so, for example, with the rental round production, that program's worked great for many, many years. We got a terrific team at GHCD that runs that program. And we have about 175 projects in our pipeline that we know we could fund if we had more money. So I think there's a fair amount of urgency on our side about getting those funds to put to work. I guess the final note that I mentioned is that, given how zoning works and how planning works in our state, so much of this has to happen at the municipal level. As a state, we can help support your efforts with funding and importantly, the zoning reform we got done. But it is so important what happens at the local level in terms of advocating for particular projects and creating that will to build more housing. But it really is among our most urgent priorities as a state that we simply produce a lot more housing and get out of this housing crisis.
I guess I'm muted. I don't know if you can. Okay. Anyway, I want to give an opportunity for my colleagues, Rep. Lenatra and Rep. Moratori, to ask a question or two to just go off that overview. Go ahead, Kath.
I'll go. How are you, Mr. Secretary? Good to see you, even though you're not.
Good to see you. Yes, hi.
I missed that Pine Hills visit. Not my district, but I love Pine Hills. I was there this morning at the dentist. I was just telling everybody. So I my face. And Senator Moran keeps having. But can you just elaborate? because a lot of the people in the audience are from municipalities. I see some selectmen here, and some other town officials. Could you just elaborate how, as a state, we can support the municipalities, but really what they can do? I know we have the zoning laws, but is there what they can do as a municipality to really pump up their affordable housing?
It's a great question. I think, being receptive to new projects and new proposals and helping to move along those in an expedited way and really helping to build support at the local level. And, as you know, we were 351 cities and towns. They're all different sizes, different shapes, different opportunities, different challenges. But these are, at the end of the day, local decisions. And creating I'll use the term political will at the local level to build more housing, I think is critically important. And getting proposals to move along in an expedited fashion, I think is also critically important. So it does come back to the prerogatives of individual cities and towns that they have to want to do more housing. And as I said, we have a number of tools in the toolbox to help them do that, but it is so much a local conversation and a local prerogative. And I think having municipal leadership that is pro-housing, to use for lack of a better term, I think is really, really important.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Join us. Good seeing you again. And thank you for coming to Plymouth a couple of weeks ago. Appreciate that.
Yes.
Just more of a comment. Kathy and I actually sit on the House Ways and Means, and I just appreciate you coming on our latest hearing recently and talking about the ARPA funds, and particularly around housing, because I know that's a priority of the Baker-Polito administration and you to really try to get some more of that money into housing as well. I don't know if you want to expand on that a little bit more, but there's more of a comment that we appreciate you coming forward and talking.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I very much appreciated the opportunity to come and speak with you and your colleagues. Maybe to amplify those comments a little bit, we just did this study on what we call the future of work in Massachusetts, and we released this back in July of this year. And it really tries to get at what it means for our state in a world where people are working in remote and hybrid ways, and therefore talent is more mobile, right? And we're a state that's always been all about talent. And we do have a number of people working in professions like technology, professional services, financial services, where those jobs can be done in a remote or hybrid manner. And so we asked ourselves some hard questions about just what does it mean for our state's competitiveness? We always want to be a state that develops, attracts, and retains talent, but now we're in a world where that talent's more mobile. And the report I think it's actually quite a good report. It doesn't make any predictions, but it describes different scenarios of how this world may play out. But then there's a few things that we know we simply have to do regardless of how the future unfolds. One of those is workforce development. For example, we have to reskill vast numbers of our citizens at a different level than we've had to do before, given all the economic dislocation of the pandemic and folks coming out of sectors that may be less promising and hopefully get into sectors that are more promising. We have to take a hard look at childcare, for example. But one of the items in the report that is very, very clear is that we simply have got to produce a lot more housing. And that as folks think about where they want to make their life and make their career, we gotta look at the fact that we're a high cost state. And so things we can do to bring down the cost of living here and the cost of doing business here are going to be really, really important for our competitiveness. And so it does, like I said, we've been using the term housing crisis for a while. We've known this is an issue. I think is even a more timely issue now, given this issue of talent mobility and our considerations for medium and long-term competitiveness. I guess the other thing I'd say is that we have had a focus very much on creating more affordable housing, because those are areas where government can play a very active role. If you think about, why do we subsidize affordable housing? Well, it's simply because the economics are such that the cost to acquire a site and develop it and construct housing compared to the rents you get for affordable housing, those don't match up, hence the need for a public subsidy. And so a lot of our efforts and energy are focused there. That said, we need to produce housing of all kinds across the state. I mean, look, I could say our strategy is all kinds of housing everywhere. And so we think about it in a few segments: affordable housing, workforce housing, and then market rate housing. But the need is really for all kinds. And again, it does depend on having this kind of resolve at the local level to produce housing needed for that community.
Well, thank you, Secretary. The last point you made, I'm particularly appreciative of. You probably know I have the universal child care bill, and right now young families are paying the same as a monthly mortgage or monthly rent just for
Yeah.
child care. So we do have to look at it, as you suggested, sort of 360. I can't thank you enough for coming to Plymouth-Patuxet with us today, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and we always appreciate as legislators just the continuing conversation and your easy accessibility. So thanks for that.
Well, thank you, Senator. Great to be with you and Rep. Moratori and Rep. Lenatra. Always great to be with our colleagues in the legislature, and very much appreciate the opportunity to be with you all. So thank you very much.
Can we ask Mike to stay on a minute?
He's unable to. We checked, but we will forward
Okay,
questions.
Mike. Who's Bob Downing?
Might be some follow-up questions for you as a result of this meeting.
Yes, let us know, of course.
Thank
Thank you. Okay, great.
He's at another meeting, so we had.
Giving the mic to me.
Go ahead.
Senator Moran. Thank you for having me and us today. I truly appreciate being here. I certainly represent a senior segment. I'm the Director of Elder Affairs for the town of Plymouth and proud to be so. I think today everything's a little skewed, and the housing market is certainly skewed for any demographic population. I want you to envision, though, that that is how it always is for the senior population. Throw a little few statistics because I think it's important. I think to recognize that seniors, the average income for a senior is $32,000. The average Social Security income is $16,000. There are senior housing units in Plymouth. There are 5 of them. There's 386 units, and there's 33,000 seniors in the town of Plymouth. But there are luckily 15 plus, 55 plus communities. So I did a little research. Casabella is a beautiful 55 plus community. The average house price, $350,000. Chilton Park, $400,000. Great Island, $450,000 to $635,000. Pinehurst Village, $120,000 to $200,000, not bad. $132,000, I'm not sure. Rolling Mills, $400,000 to $600,000. Summer Reach, $400,000 to $500,000. You get the picture. My point is we need to define what is affordable housing. That's the buzzword that everybody uses, but I'm not sure it means the same thing to everybody. So I'm here at the table today to define affordable housing and close that gap for seniors. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Gretchen Ellis. I'm the director at the Pembroke Council on Aging. I'm a Kingston resident and also sit on the housing board there. And over 300,000 extremely low income renters are here in Massachusetts right now. 40% of that is just seniors alone. And currently in Kingston, we only have 48 units. The waiting list is over 1,500, with 328, I believe, most recently, just residents. We need funding, we need availability, and we need land acquisition and usage well-defined for us so we can build more housing at a more affordable cost and smaller houses. We don't need huge houses, we just need small houses. And thank you for having us today.
So let me ask a follow-up question. Is there a community you see, anyone, who does it better, who has, and I'm not calling out particular communities, I'm more interested in the ideas. In other words, is there something where you would say, gee, I saw a great thing in, LA, and I wish we were doing it here. Does anybody have an out-of-the-box?
So actually, Dennis down the gate. Dennis does a great job with affordable housing. My parents have a house there and I see it. In Pembroke, you're close to 10%, so you're doing a good job in Pembroke. I mean, I'm also a resident of Kingston. Gretchen, I think we're at 3.2 the last time I checked. And when Gretchen mentions the senior housing we do have in Kingston, it's really, should not be for seniors. It's not accessible. It needs to be redone. So, it's 3 levels without an elevator. So it's not accessible to everyone. But Dennis, I was on the Affordable Housing Trust in Kingston, I believe, Jess is now. And we had been to some workshops, and Dennis seems to do a good job. I mean, their population is mostly senior as well, but they have some single-family houses. That's just one that I can pinpoint that's local. I don't know about other states.
Well, and some of that, just coming from the Cape, comes out of what we're all dealing with, which is just the real desperation of, workforce issues, for example. And folks who have larger homes who no longer either want the upkeep, can afford it, or it's no longer appropriate. Someone else? Go right ahead. I don't think we need the mic if we can all hear.
That's fine. I don't think I need the mic either. So, I want to, you asked me what community does it well? Plymouth does it well. Plymouth does it very well. We have 386 units, but we also have 630 vouchers. And we manage them well. We also manage Duxbury, we manage Kingston, we manage Carver. And I think just based upon the observations that I've had of those, particularly Kingston and Duxbury, we've improved the housing there significantly. One of the big things, everybody's talking about new. Well, the federal government and the state government aren't building public housing, and I represent public housing. But the one thing we need to do is maintain the housing that we have. We do a good job of keeping ours in good shape, but they were built in 1963 through 1980. They need roofs, they need windows. We're doing a lot of those things, but they need underground utilities, all these other things, and it's a lot more cost effective to use some of the ARPA funds to maintain the buildings that we have than it is to go out and build new buildings. Our seniors depend upon it. It's kind of frustrating. We have inclusionary zoning, but yet if it's a senior village that's being built, they don't have to go into inclusionary zoning. They have to find another site to build it on or contribute to the Affordable Housing Trust. It's really kind of interesting that Secretary of Community mentioned Pine Hills. There's nothing affordable about it. They do contribute significantly to Affordable Housing Trust, and that money gets used effectively. But as I said, it's just kind of frustrating to not be able to do what we need to do. And then on top of that, we talk about local people trying to get into local housing. Well, it's a statewide system now. So we don't have the ability to target the people that have been living in our community for many, many years to get into our own housing, which we should be able to do.
Well, that's an idea for legislation going forward. Matt?
Yeah, I think Russ is right. I don't think the question is who does it well and who doesn't. I think if you hit it right on the head, I think we need to come up with ways to maintain and upgrade the ones that are existent. And going to what Michelle had to say with the numbers, it doesn't matter what you do, Russ, even if you just stuck to Plymouth residents, there still wouldn't be enough housing. So that's the real issue. And how do we create more housing? And really it comes down to funding as well. So, and funding with land, et cetera.
Go for it.
Yeah, I'm Connie Miller-Horse, and I represent the Plymouth Task Force and homelessness. And there are people who are living on the street. We need to get them off the street into housing. And as the first gentleman, as the rest of you have said, the number one question is availability, finding units that we can put individuals into that are affordable with vouchers, and or finding suitable property that we can develop to take people off the street. So availability and affordability.
And before we leave that point, what is the availability of partnerships for retraining and to get that person who's housing challenged completely right now back into a situation where they can be more self-sufficient going forward?
So for those folks who are able to get into subsidized housing through our organization partnering along with Father Bill's, is to get them off the streets first.
Right.
And then those individuals that are housed with subsidies are working with a case manager to help them get back on their feet. Now, understand, not all individuals are able to get into the job market either because they're older, disabled, have substance abuse issues that need to be dealt with. So number one, housing first. Number two, case manager.
Thank you. Go ahead, Bob, first.
My name is Bob Downing. Susan, thank you for having this. Mike Keneally and I have talked about this problem many times, and I'm going to tell you about a solution that is actually working in many places around the country, and we've been trying for 9 years to bring it to Massachusetts. I'm well aware of the problems. I did my first housing deal in Detroit in 1978. I've done thousands and thousands of housing units around the country. And our effort now is on seniors. And most of you don't need anybody else to tell you how bad it is if you're a senior. Maybe you know Massachusetts is ranked last in economic security, according to UMass, because it costs so much. So our solution revolves around using Medicaid. And we have 50 communities around the country that we've been involved with that are just for low-income seniors, and we use Medicaid and all the housing tools like tax credits and bonds. And we have a proposal. We met with Charlie Baker, we met with Secretary Keneally, Secretary Sutters, many, many times in the past couple of years. COVID really slowed us down. But locally, we've identified 2 sites in Plymouth. One is Corters Park. Joe Giannetti and I have been talking for years. The other site in Plymouth is very well known, but I'm not going to mention it. I have my eye on the Sacred Heart School in Kingston. I'm going to follow up on that this week. We've talked to Vinny over at the Senator, our ex-Congressman Senator over at Bridgewater. Maybe I'll do something on his campus. And this is a real game changer for Massachusetts because, for example, in New Jersey, we had a ribbon cutting last week. We're going to have 150 beautiful apartments for seniors. They pay with Medicaid and SSI. That's what they pay. So everybody can afford it. Beautiful dining rooms, recreation, looks just like Laurelwood. In fact, Laurelwood is managing Laurelwood owners are managing one of our communities that's under construction in Washington, D.C. We opened up our first Washington deal in June. So I've mentioned to Senator Moran, we have 2 things we need for Mass Health. We need 2 reg changes, and you need to make sure that you tell them you met me, and please do it, because all this conversation about what we need, we can do this now. And it's on the table, and it has to be done.
And we talked about you sending the proposed legislation, which I look forward to. Planning
No, it's
perspective,
not
and then John.
legislation. No, be careful. It's not legislation. It's regulatory change. We don't want to deal with legislation. That takes way too long. It's
Very
regulatory
good
change.
point. Very good point. Let's go planning, Echo Dev, and then John.
Lee Hartman, Director of Planning and Development for the town of Plymouth. So just a couple of stats. Outside of Cambridge and Boston, Plymouth has more residential units that have been built in Massachusetts outside of those 2. So we're the 3rd one with the most residential units being constructed. Currently, right now, we have over 1,000 units being constructed either through 40B or through 40R. So the pressure on Plymouth, I don't know what's going on in the rest of the state, is pretty great. So just 3 comments. One is the recognition of that kind of commitment from the town for a financial contribution to this town to help us with the pressures of growth that goes with that kind of scale of development would be very helpful. Second, our affordable is defined by the Cambridge-Boston area. And so it's a crazy thing because it's really not affordable. So when we look at what the state defines as affordable, we're clumped into the Cambridge-Boston area, and they're really not real numbers for Plymouth.
Yeah, that's so unrealistic.
And the third thing I have, which I find absolutely fascinating, is that we're dealing with DEP right now, and DEP more and more is limiting the amount of water we're allowed to withdraw and provide for municipal water, which directly competes with the state's other goal of creating more housing. Every time now we deal with a larger housing project, the issue of our water limitations imposed by DEP come on. So again, dealing with the state with two conflicting goals too.
And that's just the infrastructure point that you were gonna, please, echo Doug.
Oh, I don't know if you want to let me do that, but since, hi folks, I'm Steve Cole.
Somebody put a timer on.
I'm pretty much just some guy, but I have a really cool job. And just to build on some of Lee's comments, it's not even just the regulations for what the draw is, it's also the 55+ water requirements. It's 110 gallons per bedroom per day for a normal market rate home, but 55+ is half that. So there's a bit of an incentive there, of course, for developers to develop 55+, just partly because of water restrictions. Our chief export employment is becoming our high school students, because so many of the units that are being developed are age restricted. So about 70% of every town's budget goes to school functions. That's about an average, right? Some are lower, some are more. But the fact of the matter is 70 cents of every dollar in tax revenue that economic development brings into a community, it goes to a school district that's exporting these kids because they're not even old enough to live here when they graduate. So the infrastructure comment is very well taken. As a former planner in an adjacent community, I have to explain to people sometimes why, when they turn on their water, it comes from a hole that's buried in their front yard. And when they flush their toilet, it goes to a hole that's buried in their backyard. And those have to be 150 feet apart, and they have to be 150 feet apart from your neighbor's property too, your neighbor's septic and water. That obviously doesn't allow for density to occur. So if we had infrastructure, we could allow for greater density to occur. Mindful also of the draw. The aquifer beneath our feet is 500 billion gallons. It's more than the quad. But the last time the state took on an infrastructure project like this was in the 20s. And it wasn't done until the 40s. And you took away 4 towns to do it. So I understand why it hasn't happened since, but the fact of the matter is we have one of the fastest growing areas of the Commonwealth. Secretary Kennelly touched on the future of work. They project 600,000 new residents in the Commonwealth by 2030, and they did that 2 years ago. Well, Metro North is built out. Metro West is built out. Berkshires, yes, they need housing, but they're different states altogether, so they have a different idea of what they need. The other 3 counties in Western Mass are losing population. And let's face it, I mean, Barnstable County is losing population too. It's the 3rd fastest growing county, but this is the 2008 problem that we had. One of the reasons why the Massachusetts housing economy didn't dip like every other state in 2008 is because of outside investment. And that's what's informing what we're seeing in Barnstable County. By the time you cross the bridge, the median age goes from Plymouth at 47 to 50.
Yep.
And by the time you're in East End, it's 60. And once you're in Truro, natural attrition starts happening. So I think the conversation, if I was to provide a solution, one of the things I was intent on studying further was the effects of things like the starter home overlay districts. It was lumped in with 40R. Commonwealth Magazine did a pretty good job kind of exposing that maybe that's one of the reasons why it didn't take off. But the conversation we're having about senior housing is similar to the conversation we should be having about starter home housing. It's limited to about a quarter acre. It's limited to about 1,700 square feet. When I was in Carver, I mean, we saw seniors leaving partly because, and I'm sure Russ knows this, partly because you can't manage a 2-acre lot with 3 floors up and down. And that's not necessarily a starter home either for a lot of folks. So the last thing I'll end on is this. Housing is important. It has to be a regional conversation. 82 to 85% of the tax base in Plymouth is from residential sources, 6% from commercial, another 9% from industrial. So our task is to compete with housing interests for the same use. The land is limited, and we're competing with housing interests. A rose by any other name is still a rose. Plymouth is the center city for our region. We need more jobs in our region to support the residential growth that needs to happen in our suburbs, because Plimpton, Carver, they're all expanding. They're all just added a new police station, new schools, new firehouses. They need a residential tax base to support that. You're not going to get the commercial base that Plymouth could draw, but using Plymouth's prestige and influence and status and ability to be innovative, if we had some funding from the state to solve some of these infrastructure problems, we could establish ourselves as a commercial district that supports all the other regions, all the other communities in the region. So I'll rest on that. Thank you for the opportunity.
Very, very good point. It dovetails with some funding that Matt and I have gotten for a regional convention center. We're hoping to do things that sort of feed bottom up for jobs and all the local businesses that we have here that are currently struggling. We hope to grow more from that. And now, thanks for your partnership on that. John, please go ahead, and then we'll pivot to the other side of the room again.
Thank you, John. Yeah, Winsky from Father Bills in Moon Spring. People don't know us, we provide emergency shelter and housing for families and individuals across Southern Mass. I've been working with Connie and the task force for years and have brought subsidies, mobile vouchers to the town of Plymouth through the HUD model of ending homelessness. And we have over 60 units right here scattered throughout the greater Plymouth community without anybody really knowing it, in a sense, right? But it can't be the only approach to address, our poorest neighbors. When I think about, not to speak on homelessness, but one of the things that I've realized is you need a mixed income strategy. And so, when we're looking at development and an affordable housing, always think about the 0 to 30%, our poorest neighbors, no matter if they're homeless or if they're not. And what happens is we end up with shelters and we end up with large affordable housing for the homeless, supportive housing, because when people are developing housing, they're not creating targeted units, a few units for our poorest neighbors. So you won't have organizations like us trying to develop a 50-unit building just for homeless people. If the developers that are developing it, and they're developing 30 to 50 units, put 5 units in there to help our people. So mixed income strategy can really help. The challenges we all face, and it's great, and Senator brought it up in the reps today, of the zoning changes here. Our zoning laws are so outdated still. That is the #1 housing challenge here in the Commonwealth. You can't put a multifamily property up outside of 128 without relief. So it's literally, we've lost the rooming houses from the old days. They're all condos now. So zoning is still, one of the top challenges. We all face is the NIMBYism, not in my backyard, of those challenges. So political will, no matter what kind of project, is very important. And it's great to hear about the ARPA and the money that's going to go into housing production, but what you're going to need with all of that capital is you're going to need deep subsidies. And nobody's saying where the deep subsidies, the operating subsidies, are going to come. Who's going to provide those at the state or from HUD? All the HUD money coming in is temporary vouchers. So, thinking about that, when you think about like the success of some of our projects to deal with homelessness for sustainability, for chronic homeless individuals, people that struggle the most with behavioral health issues, mental health, substance abuse, that's the group we should target. 70% of the people, families or individuals that experience homeless, come in and out, right? They find their way, they catch their breath, and they move on. That 30% used to be in the mental health institutions, in the hospitals. Targeted housing for that, 93% of them stay housed over 3 years. And 80% of them pay 30% of their income towards the rent. It works. And for families, just to wrap up, for housing, when we do focus groups with our parents, the #1 housing challenge that they can't move on with a job or not, the 2 things is, no matter where we build the housing, childcare. So great to hear. The cost of childcare and transportation is a huge problem.
Well, it's a multi-dimensional problem, we all know. And, it's a matter of looking at, not just, it's sort of, people can appreciate and imagine building housing, but we have the problem of no program for capitalizing the infrastructure in terms of maintenance. We don't, it's very, very difficult to fund, to just have a pot of money in case the roof leaks or for all of these problems. It's tough. People just don't want to buy into that or pay into that in advance. That's a whole nother issue. Please.
I'm Dottie Fulgenetti, and I'm chair of the select board in Easton, but I also work on housing with Old Colony Planning Council. So just as a nod to local political will, it's all fun and games until somebody says they want to put affordable housing in your neighborhood. And then we have a lot of people in our boardroom with torches and pitchforks. And we need more people that care about affordable housing, more grassroots organizations to fill our rooms and say, counteract that. It's the same, 10, 15 loud voices that are against it out of our community of 25,000. And another thing that I would add, talking about equity, I can't even tell you how many people that I know that you would be horrified if you saw some of the emails that we got protesting affordable housing. And these are from people with Black Lives Matter signs on their front lawn. So, people should not be hypocritical. If you support equity, then you need to support affordable housing and equitable housing.
And we've got to do more outreach and education. It's all of us. It's all of our kids. It's our nurses, our firefighters, our town employees. It's everyone except a small percentage who can afford the prices that are real, as Kathy was saying, are just blowing up all over the district. One more before we wrap up. Anyone, please?
So Rick Bayo from McBrico. We're a local developer, do a fair amount of our work, or most of our work in Plymouth. And I'd say we're one of the few local developers who have made a fairly strong commitment to building and managing, in some cases, workforce and affordable housing. We've built, by the end of this year, about 60 units of affordable housing and about 30 plus units of workforce housing. Which has been great. We're all for it. We would build as many as we could get approved. The problem is that's going to dry up. I mean, the zoning that we've already talked about, a number of times, is not going to be it. There's not enough pieces of land that's owned properly to allow the density that we can afford to do something like that. It's as simple as that. Secondly, I think both us and the town of Plymouth and the Affordable Housing Trust has done an excellent job of public-private partnerships to create this housing. But the town of Plymouth is only going, or the Affordable Housing Trust is only going to have so much money to do that. The state or federal government really needs that program, much like what we've done with these private-public partnerships, to be able to create that housing. I don't think it's a fair statement to say developers don't want to or would rather do the multi-million-dollar house. It's simply a function of economics. I mean, there has to be a return on it. If you can create the density, through zoning, and you can create the private-public partnership to do it with state and federal funding, developers will build it. There's no question about that, and they'll also manage it. And I think we've created a model that I think works extremely well, and we would build many more models, many more units if funding and the zoning is there.
Well, if you want to know how to do it, you ask someone who does it, right? So it's so important that you have the last word, because there's so much optimism in what you say. And the biggest point I want to make today is that this is not the end of the conversation. If anyone has not had a chance to put your contact in the little paper that's in the middle of the table, please do that. Also, if you have an idea, if we didn't get to you, if there's something you need to know more of, this is a fundamental problem. It's not just childcare, it's not just transportation. Housing is fundamental for everything, and in some respects, it's a better foundation than our tourism economy, or more important in some respects. In partnership with Lenatra and Noratori, we are on this. We're tired of kicking the can down the road. We know we've got all the experts in the room here, and we can't thank you enough for your participation. I don't want to forget to mention how generous it was to have Secretary Keneally here. It's not easy to get, and really to thank Plimoth-Patuxet for the great setting. It was beautiful coming down here, and they left
they left some fudge on the table. So, all of you, I just want to applaud all of your efforts. You've been doing this a while. You've had successes. We want more successes. And thank you very much.